that I've asked to read. Is it so? Did you all
Partially.
get the time to read?
Partially.
Partially? Okay. And what about the topics that we discussed yesterday? Were you able to absorb it, understand it
Still in the process.
in the process? Still trying to process it cognitively?
Yes,
Yes,
miss.
miss.
Yes.
Yes, miss. I went back and I reviewed the information you gave yesterday. Along with what helped me yesterday is that I listened to a few short videos on YouTube. I think that one of the young men recommended it, and it helped me a lot in understanding it. It put a lot
Okay,
of
great.
clarity.
Yes. So along with reading, you can also watch videos, YouTube videos. And yes, what about the research papers? Did you all study how, like, did you study any kind of research papers that were cited in the studies in the PDF that you have for your the handbook?
For me, I
No,
didn't start the
not
research
today.
papers as yet because I was trying to read, the other stuff you recommended. So, miss will come around.
Okay. Okay. So before proceeding further, can somebody summarize what we have done yesterday? Quickly, just of 5 minute summary of what has been done yesterday so that we can have a quick
Hey
revision.
boy, I can beat you.
Hmm? Anyone?
Miss, is it
Yes.
okay for me to log out and log back in? I can hardly hear you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, you can log out and come back. Okay, class. Yes, I need a quick summary of what we have done yesterday. Anyone, please?
Good evening, ma'am. Good
Good
morning,
evening.
colleagues.
Good morning. Good evening. Good morning.
So, as brief as I can be, we looked at the introduction to cognitive psychology, looking at all of the mental processes, that cognitive psychology entails, such as retrieving and the different ways in which we form memories. We also looked at the scientific study of the mind. So we briefly touched on the goals of research, such as data gathering, analysis, theory development, hypothesis formation, hypothesis testing, and the way that these applications can be used outside of the research environment. So then we looked at the laboratory or controlled experiments, which is an imperialist way of doing experimental research. We looked at psychobiological research, self-reports, case studies, and naturalist observation, which I would like to think is not the imperialist, but the other way of doing research, computer stimulations, and artificial intelligence. We also briefly touched on domains of cognitive psychology, so perception, pattern recognition, consciousness, memory. And then we went on to the history. I think we went on in the history of cognitive psychology, where we looked at imperialists maintaining that knowledge comes from experience, whereas native is suggesting that it's innate, you're born with it, it's in your brain. So the whole thing of Plato and Aristotle, comparing those two, yes. So we went to that. Then We looked at, I think, a bit more of the history in the 1950s and the different ways until we reached to the key issues in the study of cognitive psychology. So is it nature? Is it nurture? No, what really is it? So we had some discussions there, and then we were going to go to Unit 2, and then we had a whole lot of questioning happening about dreams. Basically, that's what we did.
Okay,
I
thank you.
remember
Thank
clearly. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, dear learner. So, do we have any question from Unit 1, the topic that we have discussed yesterday? Do we have any questions, or shall we move on to Unit 2 now? Or shall we take questions at the end of the session?
Yes, at the end of the session.
Yes, miss, that's acceptable.
Okay, fine. So we'll take question at the end of the session, and then we can club questions from Unit 1 and then maybe 2, and then maybe you can have certain questions related to all the topics. Okay, so Unit 2, as the name itself, you can say that the name is Information Processing in Learning and Memory. So before we move forward to other theories of psychology, we also have to first of all understand and can you think why we're studying learning and memory at the first place? In cognition or in cognitive psychology, what is the importance of studying learning and memory, or why there is a need to study learning and memory? Why not any other topics? Why not problem solving? Why not thinking? Why not creativity? Why not intelligence? Why only memory and learning right now?
Good morning again, everybody. Good morning, ma'am. Concerning learning and memory, I think it's a start because we need to understand how and what is going on in the brain. Because if we do not know and we do not understand how it works and what is going on there, then we wouldn't know what to do going forward. So it's a base for us to understand actually how psychology works and how we're going to understand it more so.
Okay, so like I mentioned, there are other dimensions also of cognitive psychology. People are joining. Why there are some individuals who are not able to join by themselves? What is the reason behind this? Okay, I'll sort it out that again. Okay, so yes, so for example, you have to understand, first of all, you have to understand the domains that I mentioned, like problem solving, thinking, intelligence, creativity. These are acquired after we have a particular experience on learning, right? Then only we can think about certain information like this. Okay. Um, so class, please make sure that you join on time. Otherwise, it's really difficult to switch on the videos from one window to another. So make sure that you join within 5 minutes. Otherwise, it's again a problem. Okay, so this is one of the reasons that why we're studying this topic, first of all. And secondly, to acquire certain kind of knowledge, to acquire certain kind of behavior or any kind of skills or any our values or preferences or any kind of understanding for any subject or for even for information processing also. Learning is a very important component. So that is why learning and memory, they're interrelated, they cannot be separated again. So we would also talk about
Come on, I said today, your class go on, what are y'all left?
uh,
Yeah, me go come and soup and me don't talk to
Samuel,
you.
please
Samuel,
mute
it's
yourself.
Mike.
Sorry. I'm very sorry.
yes, class, please mute yourself. It's so it's difficult for me to build up the thoughts once I start the discussion. Okay, so yes, we have Benjamin Bloom. So he also has suggested that different domains of learning. First of all, you have to understand that we learn at the cognitive level. So our frontal lobe. I hope you are aware of the fact that we human brains have 4 types of lobes: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and then temporal lobe. Yes, so all the cognitive activities, they are governed by the frontal lobe, right? So to recall, to calculate, or to discuss, or to analyze, or solve the problems, all these are governed by the cognitive activities. All these come under the domains of cognitive activities, and this is governed by the frontal lobe. Then we also have psychomotor activities like dancing, swimming, skiing, diving, driving a car, or riding a bike. All these psychomotor. So for a young kid also, like just a 3 or 5 year old child whose development is going to take place, so for that motor, have you heard about this motor development and gross skills and motor skills? So these are
Yes.
some very basic skills that gets to
Okay.
develop into a child, right? So psychomotor activities is also, or psychomotor learning also, or this is one of the domain of learning. Then we have affection. So affection, it's again emotions, or it could be, our emotions, our fear, our relationship, our worshipness, worship, appreciation. All this comes under the domain of affective. So this is one of the domain that has been mentioned by Benjamin Wolf Bloom in the year 1965. Again, you have to cite when you write your answers. You cannot just mention without citing these researchers, because they have done some kind of research, and then only they have come to this conclusion, right? So you have to mention their names as well when you cite them in your exams or in your assignment also. Hmm? Then next we are also going to understand the different memory, or different models of memory. So here we have sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. I'm sure everybody is well aware of these three types of memory, because this is how our memory is divided into three different storage systems. So right now I can give a very small example, very brief example. That is, right now you are listening to me, and your eyes are on the PPT or the PDF that I've shared. So your sensory memory is working, isn't it? So your all the sensory organs that is indulge in this class, that is indulge, or you're paying attention in the class, so all these are governed by your sensory memory. It is also known as working memory. We'll see that, but yes, over the period of time the name has been changed. And so sensory, like our visual and auditory organs, are responsible or are focusing right now in the class. So this is how our sensory memory works. And it is a very a small like it works only for 3 seconds. For vision it's 1/2 a second, and for hearing it's just a 3 second. So it is a very limited capacity of processing. Then the second stage is short-term memory. So also, yes, class, before I go further, I would also want you to write a homework. That is, you are going to read about a research paper that was given by a research by John Miller, 1956. So he has worked upon the 5 + - 2 concept. So it was his original work. It was his PhD work. So he has worked on this thing, on this research. So what you have to do is you have to download this research paper online. You'll get it, but make sure that you read the original one. Don't read others' opinions, or the commentaries, or the suggestion given by other researchers on his work. But his original research has to be read, so that you exactly know what he has done in his PhD. Okay, coming to short-term memory, again, it also has a very limited capacity. The duration is just from 3 to 20 seconds. And it was believed that John Miller, I'm mentioning his name. So he found in his research that we could, for example, if you have to if you have to memorize a phone number. So for example, in India we have our phone number is of 10 digits. So for this person in the research, he mentions that we can recall 7 digits. We can recall one at a time. No, we can remember or memorize it only this much, but we have to put more attention, and then we can memorize the whole number. But 5, 6, 7 digits is very easy for us to memorize it. So 5 to 7 digits, it's easy for us to memorize. That's what he found in his research. But still, you can also read his research paper in detail. So coming back, and he also, and his this experiment was also known as Miller's magic number. So it was George Miller's classic study, which was done in 1956, and this is what he found, that the amount of information which can be remembered on one exposure is between 5 and 9 items. So depending on the information, so it could be either like you could maybe you could remember 5 to 7 digits, or maybe 7 to 9 digits also. Like this experiment was done. So before, we can discuss this in later also in detail, but I would want that you read this paper. Okay, coming back to short-term memory. So short-term memory, the duration, as it has been mentioned, is just for 3 to 20 seconds. And if you if you have this understanding that okay, now I need to send this information to my long-term memory so that I could recall it for future. So right now, let me take the example of your class. You are reading this note so that you could recall it in the future, right? So you will send it to long-term memory. Like right now I mentioned that you have to read Miller's magic number, the research paper that was given in 1956. You'll read this. Now maybe next time after a week I'm going to we can discuss this paper, or I'll ask you to discuss this paper. So for that purpose you are going to send this information to your long-term memory. So this is how you send information from working memory or sensory memory to short-term memory and then long-term memory. So this is how your, so when we send information to long-term memory, it is stored permanently in our storage system. So can you visualize the three stages of memory? Sensory memory, then short-term memory, and then long-term memory. Can you visualize it? The process of how we are going to send information to a long-term memory permanently? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah? Or no?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Or is it confusing to visualize the process? Short-term memory, then sensory, short-term, and then long-term. So it doesn't mean that once you send information to long-term memory, it will stay there permanently. There are other technicalities that would come when we have to send memory to to long-term memory. From short-term to long-term, there are some technicalities. We are going to see that, and yes, there is always a chance we forget it. So you can also always ask this question, that why do we forget, or why we can't recall, after a certain period of time somebody is there.
Miss, Madam,
Yes. Yes, Kimberly.
this long-term memory, when you send it to the long-term memory, this disease that when people age, Alzheimer's, is that part of a disease of lasting of the long-term memory or something like that?
No, no.
Alzheimer's.
So, Simul, no, yes, Simul. So, this is not about, we're not going to talk about learning dementia. We're not talking about forgetting. We'll talk about forgetting, but dementia, cognitive impairment, mild cognitive impairment, they're all
Oh,
different
thank you.
components. We'll talk about that. We also have a topic on other things. All these topics, we'll talk about this. They comes under neurodevelopmental disorders. We'll talk about them. Yes, Charmin? Charmin, you have raised your hand.
Miss, in
Hmm.
yes, miss. In
Yes.
terms of the long-term memory, the sensory, and the short-term memory, I
Hmm.
in my readings, and it's something that I was a bit confused about, hence the reason I'm asking. In my reading, it stated that it is not definitively that okay, the once the memory is in the short-term memory, it will be transferred to the long-term memory if it is there for a while. So
Hmm.
I'm a
Hmm.
bit confused on why and how
No.
is that process done?
Miss,
Yes.
James,
So,
we are talking that.
okay, mute
Yes.
yourself, class. So it is not necessary that the kind of information that you want to send to long term, or the information that is in the short term memory will definitely go to long term memory. No, there is a procedure. So there is a stage. Try to visualize what I'm trying to say. There is this sensory memory, then short term memory, and then long term memory. If you feel right now you are using your sensory memory, but if you don't have the motivation, or if you don't pay attention, or if you feel that this information is not necessary to send to your short term memory, then you're not going to send it. Your brain is not going to send it. So the same applies for the second stage also, from short term memory to long term also. You need motivation, you need attention, you need the intention to send this information to long term memory. Are you getting me? So there should be an intention. There are some other psychological factors which are responsible to send the or are they're responsible to store the information from these two channels. So we'll talk about elaborative rehearsal, we'll talk about maintenance rehearsal, so I've also already mentioned about the psychological factors that are responsible to send information from short term to long term, or from sensory to short term. Are you getting my point, Charmin? Okay. Yes, Charmin, yes. Huh. Okay, and Jonet Chase, you have raised a hand. Yes.
Yes, Miss. Good morning. I was just thinking along the line whereby, for example, you were talking about the sensory moving to the short-term memory. Now, if is it that I am teaching a concept right? It will be there present for the short-term memory. But as you repeat, as you probably, let me say, for example, you're rehearsing or practicing a particular thing that you would have learned, eventually that would transfer to the long-term memory. Am I right? Or
Yes.
am I
No, you're right.
thinking
So that is
differently?
known as no, that you're absolutely right. So that is known as elaborative rehearsal because when we have to send, so to send information from sensory memory to short-term memory, you don't need any kind of rehearsal, but to send. So let's take example of your notes only. You have so many notes, so many readings to study. Do you think you'll be able to send by just scrolling down the PDFs? Do you think you'll be able to send it to long-term memory and write your exams and assignments without no, right? So just if you want to remember the key pointers or the headings of the topics, maybe you can scroll down and just maybe you can recall one or two items, one or two components of the PDFs that has been mentioned, but not all, right? So you have to send the information from short-term memory to long-term memory through two processes. You can send it to through process. One is the maintenance rehearsal and the other one is elaborative rehearsal. So maintenance rehearsal is like you uh, keep on repeating the so okay, let's explain elaborative rehearsal first. So elaborative rehearsal would be like you want to for example, I want to understand the concept of a particular topic. You elaboratively you process the information at the deeper level, right? You when we were young kids, we had this problem that we cannot recall it better. We cannot recall in the exam. We studied, but we couldn't recall in the exam. Did you do you face that? Had you faced that problem in your school days? Yes, because we couldn't, until unless we understand the meaning of a particular topic properly at the elaborative level or at the deep level, we are not going to send it to the long-term memory. So that's what researchers have believed. And coming back to maintenance rehearsal, even if you understood the meaning of a particular topic or any idea, you still have to maintain it. Maintain it in the sense that you have to repeat again and again, revise it again and again. Revision. It's kind of revision. You have to revise. Right. So I don't know. For me, I revise by writing my notes. I understand the meaning. I make pointers, and then before exam and like 2-3 months before, I would be revising my notes. So that works. That memory technique works for me. But for you all, it could be different. Maybe you could recall after, even if you understood the meaning, and maybe you can just recall in the exam. So it's different for every individual. But this is how it works. So Janet, yes, you're right, you rehearse it, but there are two types of rehearsal again: maintenance rehearsal and the elaborative rehearsal, to send information to from sensory to short-term long-term memory. Okay.
Thank you, Miss.
Okay. So yes, we do have, anybody has raised their hand? Somebody
Yes,
has.
I did. You're right, Miss, because I did math at university, and we just have to paste up them formula in our rooms and then rehearse it, turn here the long formulas of integration, differentiation. So you have to store that, but it don't store it if it doesn't have a meaning. So you know that you have to pass this exam, so you have to store it in your brain. Thanks.
Yes, yes. So meaning has to be understood. Processing has to be done at the deeper level, right? Yes. Okay. Yes, Alicia will talk about the Atkinson. Yes, all their different models. Will talk about them. Shakira, you have a question?
Yes, so I am thinking about the motivation and so in terms of learning. And so we're talking about maintenance. We're talking about doing it elaboratively in terms of remembering. And so what if we're doing both of these methods and it's not working? Or if we're remembering and we remember it like probably for a week and then after then, that's it. What's going on there?
Yes, we do have explanation that was given by Herman Ebbinghaus. So he gave the forgetting curve, and he has mentioned that yes, when, for example, if I ask you what we have studied in the evening, maybe by at 10 p.m., if I ask you what we have studied, you would be able to recall better that these are the topics that we talked about. But after 1 month, if I ask you, though you understood the topic, but maybe after 1 month, if I ask you what we studied on 3rd April, which topic we discussed, maybe you'll not be able to recall. So yes, we do forget. It's because of that, again, different factors why we forget, because of interference, because of trace decay, maybe the kind of information that was stored in your brain again, we have failed. I mean, not failed, but yes, we don't know which part of the brain the memory is stored. But yes, there again, it is believed that we have short term, then long term, and then all these researchers are there. So if your memory is not intact, if you don't revise it, so revision is necessary. So that is why it is known as maintenance rehearsal also. So answering to your question, Shakira, we need to maintain it. Maintenance has to give in to what the memory you want to store and what you want to recall it. So maintenance has to be done. Okay. Am I clear, Shakira, or anything
Yes,
else?
Miss. Thank you. Thank you.
So this is all about the now. First of all, you have to understand that sensory memory, working memory, long-term memory, these are very common terms which would be explained in other theories of memory also. So we'll say that now there are different procedure to understand how memory has been explained from time to time. So here is a history of how people would define memory in the year 1940s, then 1950s. Then we have research studies by Nisher 1967. So he has tried to explain that we store, we encode information, we create a mental representation of certain things in our brain, and then we store it, and then we retrieve it, and maybe that is how our experience are formed, and then we use those experience for further knowledge or further experience. Okay, so we'll talk about them also. You can read these research papers. They're all cited Hugh 2000. So what are their perspective on information processing? Or we have broadband 1975 case, 1978. So all these people, they have given different perspective on how we process information. So I'll talk about them very briefly. So broadband and case, they believe that we store it, since our brain has a very limited capacity, our mental system has a very limited capacity. So we send information. We send only those information which are important for us. So like our motivation, attention, intention, all these are the factors that is responsible. So this is how it could be proven that yes, we have a limited capacity. Some like researchers, they believe that we have an unlimited capacity, but at the same time we have research from broadband which he believed that no, we send information, we send filtered information to our brain. So that's what he has also mentioned. Then Atkinson and Schifrin, very simple model. He say this person, they mentioned that we encode information. First of all, like right now I'm speaking, so you're able to encode what I'm trying to say. Then you transform the information. Your brain is transforming it. I'm speaking English, so your brain is transforming it. If you don't know English, you will not be able to transform the information. So the language, again, the component of language is very important when we have to encode information. Then processing, your brain is processing, okay, what I'm trying to say, and then you're going to store it in your brain in the long-term memory. Again, short-term memory, but if you have an intention that you're going to, this information is beneficial for you and it's going to help you in future, so you will store it in your long-term memory. And then whenever you are required to retrieve in maybe an exam, so I'm giving you a lecture, so it is going to help you in your exam, right? So you'll retrieve it, and then you utilize the information by writing your answers in the exam. So a very brief principle of Atkinson and Schifrin on information processing. Then the third principle says that we process information through two ways. One is bottom up processing and the other one is top down processing. So we constantly, we use information that we gather through our senses. So that is known as bottom up processing. So right now, for example, if you get some okay, so for example, a child, a 2 or 3 year old child, if you give them some kind of toys, what do you think, which kind of processing they are going to use? Are they going to use bottom up or top down? Just like guess it.
Bottom up.
Bottom up, right? Because in bottom up processing, we use information through our senses. We don't have any past experience. So the difference between them is in bottom up processing and top down processing, just there's a very slight difference. That is, in top down, we use our past experience. But in bottom up, it's like we understand. So first time, maybe for the first time,
Miss,
I've seen a car.
please
So
excuse me.
yes.
I'm sorry to interject, but
Hmm.
there's an echo. So could you go a little bit slower, please?
Okay. Yes.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So, yes, I was trying to explain the difference between bottom-up processing and top-down processing. So, for example, if I've seen a toy for the first time, being a child, I'm just 3 or 4 year old child right now, and I've seen a toy for the first time. So, I don't have a previous experience about that toy. So, for that to understand or the kind of processing that I'm going to use to understand that toy would be my bottom up processing. Am I clear? Class?
Yes,
Yes,
miss.
ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
miss.
And for top-down processing would be like where I have a
Miss, could you go over that for me? I'm not clear on that. Thank you.
which one? Which topic? Which topic? Who said?
Sorry, the bottom top processing.
Okay, so for
The
bottom
bottom
up, it's
top and
like
the top.
yeah, bottom up and top down processing, there's a very slight difference that is of experience only. So in bottom up processing, there is no experience. So for example, we have a child, 3 4 year old child, who you have gifted a toy, and I mean the child has seen the toy for the first time. So the child is going to use bottom up processing, information processing. Okay, what is this? So the child is going to use the bottom up processing. For top down, maybe he got some the child got a new, again, some an advanced version of that toy. So we can say that the child would be using top down processing. Okay, so there's a
Thank
very
you very
slight
much.
difference.
Clear
Yeah,
on that.
so there's a very slight difference between them, that is of experience only. In top down, we have a previous experience, but in bottom up, we don't have any experience. When we see something new, maybe I've seen a car for the first time in my life, so I'm going to use bottom up processing.
Excuse
Yes,
me, miss.
yes, Carolyn. We can say unknown to the known. Yes, yes. Why not? Good. Who?
Excuse me, miss.
Yes, Tamika.
Good morning, everyone. So my thought process is while the child uses the bottom up with the new interaction with the toy, where do we take into account that yes, this is a new toy, but the child would have played with toys before? How
No,
do we
we
account
haven't
for that?
given. Yeah, we haven't given any toys. So the child is just 2 or 3
Okay, so
years.
this is the first experience with the toy.
Yes, first experience.
But
Yes.
then my question would be thereafter, how do we account for the child who would have played with a toy before, but not necessarily the toy that we're giving to them at the moment?
So that one, in that case, the child would be using top-down processing. That okay, so there are some personal experience, there are some previous experience from the previous toy. No, some similarity would be there, right? There are some similarities between toys because everybody semantics. We are also going to talk about semantic memory, also semantic or mental representation. So, for example, if I say apple, have you eaten an apple? So, what
Yes.
comes to your mind?
Well,
Uh,
whether you'd
uh,
want it peeled, cut, or something like that.
So if I ask everyone, have you eaten an apple? So does the spelling comes to your brain, or the apple, the red apple comes to your mind or the brain right now? Does it comes APPLE, or just the apple, the red
Image.
apple?
I think the fruit.
Image. Yeah.
The image, right? So that is known as mental representation. So even in top-down processing also, when we have a previous experience, there is an image. So our brain, we will study gestal psychology and various other information on how our brain has this thing to, see things in a pattern or create a mental representation of various things. Okay. Am I answering your question, June? Who has asked that
So
question?
just so that I'm clear, miss,
Yes.
we're saying that as long as the child would have interacted with a toy previously, even though this is a new toy, it would be the top down because the
Yes.
child would have had an experience with a toy.
Yes. Yes.
Similar
Duly
toy.
noted, and thank you.
Okay. So the next principle that has been accepted by cognitive psychology is that again, so okay, yeah, we already have this thing, the concept of language, the concept of mental representation. So it is believed that we human beings, we need a stimulus, and all this happens because of the language development. So we'll read in detail. I've already explained because of the discussion. I think I came to the point that we organize information. Our brain has this tendency to organize information in a specific way, or to see things in a mentally representation way. So this is what they're talking about. That is the fourth principle that has been accepted by cognitive psychologists. Okay. Then is it clear, class?
Yes, miss.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So yeah, and though we do have researchers that yes, our brain process differently for Asian, for Europeans, for American, for Indian. So no, Western India, Eastern perspectives are there towards language development, towards information processing. Yes, there are differences. So language is a very important component which has been studied in relation to intelligence. It has been studied in relation to personality also, and society. You know, all this has the concept of language development has been studied in different areas: rural versus urban, Asia versus European, Eastern Western perspective. All this has been studied. We'll see them in detail in your coming notes. So this was all about cognitive. I mean, we talked about the cognitive information processing, and yes. So yeah, we'll move on to next topic, that is information processing in learning and memory. Now, how do we process? So we have already seen what are the basic principles that governs our information processing approach. Now there's some there are some researchers like Session and Tulving. So they believe that memory system is defined in terms of its big brain mechanism, the kind of information it processes, and the principles of its operation. So these researchers, they believe that we have a multi-stage system to store information, and that is already proven by other researchers also. So yes, we do have a multi-storage system, like from sensory memory to short term, then long term, and then we have declarative memory, non-declarative memory. We'll see this in detail, but these are some some research-based evidence to the principle that we have discussed. So I would want you all to read this at home. Just read them once. If you have read, then that is well and good. But so there's no any like theory that I need to explain, but it's some findings supporting the evidence towards the principle that we discussed right now. Okay, now here comes the models. So we have this the information processing approach towards learning, that is known as, so again, even these researchers, they're not researchers, but it is believed that when we process information, the cognitive information processing model, it believes that we process information at three levels: encoding, that is gathering and representing information; storage, holding information; and the last and the third one is retrieval, getting the information when needed. We already discussed this, so I'm not going to talk about that again. Then we have okay, so we already talked about Nisa. He talked about the three stage of memory, that is encoding. We have then structuring and organizing, and all these are research-based evidence. So Nasser is not the person who just talked about this multi-storage system. There are various other researchers like Dempster's, Falwell, 2002. Then we have Gray, Johnson, Bayes, Benham, 1976. All these people, they have provided their evidence. Yet, yes, we do have a proper storage system. So encoding, structuring, and organizing, storage, and retrieval. All this again, and all these are backed by the scientific evidence, the names that has been cited. I hope I'm clear. Class?
Yes,
Yes,
Miss, you're clear.
Yeah. Any
Yes,
questions?
you are, miss.
Okay. Any questions as of now? I hope it's very like I'm been able to like put it in a very simple manner. Okay. Okay, I'll
Excuse
take
me, miss.
Yes.
Could you pull back down to the unit 2.5?
2.5. Okay.
And Miss, I would also like some explanation into the Sternberg information processing approach.
Yes, we're going to discuss about this. So we don't have any Sternberg approach towards information right now in this theory. Do we have in this unit? Are you talking
Yes.
about this?
It's a
On the 2.5.
2.53.
0.53,
Just
Miss.
below that.
Which one? Oh
Right
yeah, we are
after
coming
Bloom's
to
Just
that.
below that.
Yes. We are coming to
Yes.
that. Don't worry. Yes.
Okay.
So I was about to go
Thanks,
explain
Miss.
this. Okay, before that, we understand Sternberg's viewpoint on information processing. We also have Bloom's taxonomy. So I don't know how many of you are already in teaching profession, or those who have pursued their degree in education. I'm sure you might have read about Bloom's taxonomy. How many have
Yes.
read
Yes,
about
miss.
this? Yes. So,
Yes, miss.
Yes,
yeah.
miss.
This person, he
Definitely.
believed that we process information at 6 levels. Okay. So first is known as knowing. So whenever you want to process, or whenever you want to understand, for example, you have a pen. If you want to understand like you got a pen and what has to be done with that, first of all, you'll know the object, right? Second is your brain will comprehend. Maybe if you have a past experience, then you can comprehend it easily or not. Maybe if you're experiencing it for the first time, then your brain is going to comprehend. You're going to write it or whatever you want to do with the pen, right? So your brain is, that is the second level. Then the next two level, they run simultaneously. One is the application and the analysis. So you apply it. Maybe you open that cap and then you write it. Or so for the first time, do you remember the time when we hold the pen in our hand and we were not able to hold it properly also when we were in a certain class or a standard in the school? When did you get a pen? At what age? You remember?
In high school.
In high school, right? So we in here in India, we get a pen when we are in fifth or sixth standard. So when we go to school in fifth or sixth standard, then we get a pen for the first time. But it doesn't mean that that is the first time, but maybe at home. Okay, let's take an example of a child who has taken a pen for the first time. So the child is going to apply it and then analyze it, how I'm going to use it. And then the last two stages, the last two levels, is the synthesis and evaluation. So these are most complex ones. So maybe you want to invent a different, so there are different kind of pens in the market, isn't it? Like they have some kind of eraser on top of the pen, or like there's some toy or something. So you synthesize it, and then maybe you want to create a different kind of pen. Have you seen a pen which has three, what do we say, three inks?
Yes.
Red, blue, and green. So all this
Yeah.
is a work of synthesis and evaluation. The person has already seen a pen, but if you want to invent something out of a pen, maybe have you seen those pen, the fountain pen, the ink pen? We suck this ink from the ink bottle and then we use the fountain pen. So all these are result of synthesis and evaluation. So this is how we process information if you want to create something. So this Bloom's taxonomy is also believed that when you want to create certain level of uh, when you want to create some kind of discovery or any creativity has to be done, then you have to use this. You can use this domain. I mean this process, information processing approach, that is suggested by Bloom's taxonomy. Any other ideas coming to your mind where you can apply Bloom's taxonomy? Hmm? So interventions or discovery, all these people, they are using Bloom's taxonomy in their brain. Don't you feel so? Class?
Yes, Miss.
Yes.
Is it difficult to
Yes,
understand?
miss.
Yes, Miss.
Could you
Yes?
please repeat the question?
Yes. Do we have a question? Anyone?
No, I think you asked the question just now and I didn't hear it clearly.
Oh, no, I'm not asking a question, but just like an idea. I mean, where can you apply this Bloom's taxonomy? Can you think of any idea where you can apply of Bloom's taxonomy?
Miss,
In the
like
classroom?
Um,
in the
I,
classroom,
I,
a recipe.
as a nurse, miss,
Okay,
I can
yes, recipe.
apply it to my patients.
Okay.
For instance, if a diabetic patient should come to me, I would ask them what do they know about diabetes, and then I would give them information to see if that corresponds with whatever they know, and then they would try to understand it and apply it and use it in different areas of their life.
Okay. So yes, after reading all these theories, I'm sure you're going to apply in your lives, and you can think more of more ideas where you can apply them. Okay.
Miss, I think, good morning, everybody. I think that advertisers would also use this approach
Who would use this
to
approach?
sell products, to market products.
Sorry, I didn't get you. Can you repeat?
I said that I
He
think
said
that
for
advertisers using the Bloom's taxonomy, that advertisers would also want to buy into this concept as they seek to market the products and to sell the products.
Yes, why not? So you can apply, you'll get this kind of questions in your assignments. The way you can apply this kind of approach, where you'll get this question. So you can think and you can read more and apply it to your fields. Okay. So next one is the Sternberg's information processing approach. So Sternberg in 1988, so he also suggested that development should be skill based. So it is not continuous, or it is it is, I mean, it's skill based and continuous rather than stage and discontinuous. So he says that when development happens, it doesn't mean that after 2 years. So for example, the child brain has developed for 2 years and it will stop. But he believed that we process information and our development is continuously. It should be skill based, plus at the same time it is continuous. It's not going to stop at a particular time. So he has also tried to explain the biological dimension to this theory. And so he also believed that we when we process, we are going to read his theory. I mean, he has tried to explain the triarchic theory of intelligence also, where we use these components, meta components, performance components, and knowledge acquisition. But still, his intelligence theory comprises of this. We'll see there, but here he has tried to explain that when we want to develop, when we want to cognitively develop ourselves, we need a certain kind of feedback. We need self-monitoring or automatization also. So these are some changes that has to take place when we want to understand, or when a development takes place in a child or in an adult, or in the process of learning also. When we want to
Miss, there is a theory which says a child is like tabula rasa, means I can't remember which one. Like
John
a
Locke.
sponge
It
or
was
something.
given by
Tabula
John
rasa.
Locke. Yes, by John Locke. This statement was given by
John Locke,
John Locke.
yeah, John Locke. I can remember. Yeah.
Yes, so he says that we'll talk about him. You'll in lifespan development, in the second paper we'll talk about this person also. So yes, Sternberg's theory is quite related to certain factors, that we need feedback, we need self-monitoring, and at a particular time our behavior becomes automatic. Like driving, if you're driving for the first time, you need a proper support, right? And then it becomes an automatic behavior for you. So these are some, again, research-based evidence. So he says that we process information at three levels: meta components, then at the performance level, and at the knowledge acquisition component. So meta components are executive in nature. So these are something where our planning and decision making, where I mean, we solve a problem. So these are meta components are I mean, this stage is involved when we solve a problem. So problem solving activities are done by meta components. Then performance, when we actually, when you have to think, okay, for example, if you have to cross a sea or something, a road maybe. So first of all, maybe you are a child and you want to cross the road for the first time, you're crossing it. Then you're going to use a meta component. You'll make decision, you're going to plan it. And performance would be you're actually solving the task, right? And then you get a knowledge, you get an experience, and next time you will not take much time to cross the road. The child will not take much time to cross the road, isn't it? Or for any purpose also. If you're learning, if you are driving also, for the first time you'll plan, and then you'll make decision, okay, how I'm going to drive. And second would be performance component, would be where you are solving, actually you're driving, you're learning to drive. And the third one, now you have acquired the knowledge, you have the experience, and then you can think of some other learning materials. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, miss.
And
Yes, miss.
Yes. So Sternberg's theory has also been backed by Carlze, Brunner, Driscoll. So all these people, they agreed that yes, this is the procedure, or this is the stage to learn new things like meta components, performance, and then knowledge acquisition. So again, these studies have their evidence. So this is what we have in Unit 2.
Miss, excuse me before you move on.
Yes.
Based on the 1988 theory, right? I noted that he also mentioned that he added the components of feedback.
Okay.
Could you just give like well I know what feedback is, right? But as you were just linking on the 3 components that he actually looked into, but then he just went on into giving the feedback as an additional. So am I seeing it as 3 kinds of information processing components, or am I including a 4th one?
Yes, you can take it in a stage manner only. First is meta component, then problem solving, and then knowledge acquisition. So feedback would be one of the components, one of the sub component, not stages, but one of the sub component.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any question for Unit 2? Just go through once. Do you have the full reading right now? Just go through once so that you're done with the, you don't have any doubt, and then only we'll proceed further. Because next is brain. Now you have some biological, what we say, biological aspect also to learning and memory. So I don't want you all to get confused. So just go through the notes once, and then we can discuss.
Ma'am, good morning.
Yes, Sadhana.
In the 2.2, learning and memory, there's a concept that has arisen there. I'm not too familiar with it. Can you give me an example? This word schemas. It says
Okay,
they are
page
mental
number. What
models
is
of
the page number? Can you just
22, page 22.
22.
It's
Okay.
schemas. Schemas.
Okay, which one? Yeah, schemas. Mental representation. That is mental representation. You know, schemas. Like for schemas, we have a like model also. We'll see that in memory. But let me tell you, mental representation. So, for example, if I ask you, have you eaten an apple? So, does an apple comes to your mind, or the alphabets come to your mind? APPLE, or a red apple comes to your mind when I say apple?
Red apple.
The
Red
red
apple.
apple.
So schemas
Yeah.
are those are known as schemas. So we have if I say bag, does it come? I mean, a bag could be someone which you have which bag you have seen recently. That one is going to come in your mind, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So if I say a watch would be the kind of watch right now which I have. Maybe that is what that will come in my mind, not the watch which I haven't seen in my lifetime. The different kind of watches, right? But the one
Right.
which I have, that one only will come to my mind or to my brain. So these schemas, they are known as mental models of the world. Like we process information based on a mental representation of certain things, of every item in life.
Okay. Thank you. And
Yeah.
this use of chunking, the chunking, it
Chunking.
says here in long-term memory.
Yes. So, sorry, Sadhna. Yes. Sorry. Can you repeat?
Yes, the same concept of chunking. Can you go and just give me an
Yes.
example? Is it like putting a lot of information together?
Okay, I'll explain chunky in such a manner. You have a phone number 19451935. So chunking could be you make a chunks like 1945 and then 1934. This is how chunking works.
Oh,
Chunking, you
okay.
make chunks, you make groups, and then you memorize it.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So for even for A B C D alphabets, A B C D, all these we would sing and then make the rhymes. Rhyming also, that also works in this way.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, so many people have raised their hands. I cannot see Onisha or Abigail. Who wants to speak first?
I'll go first. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Okay,
Sorry,
you can go
Michelle.
first. It's fine.
All
You
right.
can go
So,
first.
pertaining to maintenance rehearsal and elaborative rehearsal, does this work with individual persons? Like, does it work with one individual as opposed to another individual, or is it absolutely necessary for everyone to use these two in order to process information and to store information?
Onisha, so you're asking, is it universal in nature? Yes, it is in universal. Is that what you're asking? It could be applied by anyone.
Okay, no, what I want to know is if it's absolutely necessary for it to be applied by everyone,
Yes,
or you
it
just
is.
choose what works best for you.
See, you can apply. You can recall the time when you were not able to recall the notes that you studied in the school, but you forgot. So, were there any techniques? We were never told in our school days that you could apply elaborative rehearsal and maintenance rehearsal and then study your notes. But now you have the information on this, and you can apply this technique for your exams, for your master's exam, master course, and write during your exams. Why not? Try to apply these things in your course, and then you can tell me, is it
Okay.
applicable for everyone or not? But yes, it does. It is applicable for everyone. It is universal in nature. That is why we are studying these courses.
Okay, thanks. One last question. I've always
Yeah.
been curious. Men always say that they're forgetful, they don't remember dates, they don't remember this and stuff like that. How would you explain that in terms of short-term memory and long-term memory? Isn't it the same thing for short-term and long-term memory for everyone, both male and female?
Yes, it is same, but maybe again it's the intention, Abigail. The intention to remember. Maybe the maybe you're motivated to remember, remember it or not. So the intention, the motivation. So I think I would explain with that only. So we don't have any scientific evidence to that, but yes, the intention and the motivation. This
I think they
component.
choose not to remember.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Samuel.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so Caroline has a question.
Excuse
Schemas allow.
me.
Yes, Onisha.
I have a question.
Yes, Onisha.
Um, I was listening to you when you were speaking on Sternberg's theory, and as you were going through the stages that he mentioned. I was wondering if it could have been related to Edward Thorndike's trial and error theory as well. If it's similar, if it's the same thing.
Onisha, it couldn't be similar, but yes, we can give a benefit of doubt to these researchers also because they have worked for so many years. Why not? So yes, you will find similarity. You'll always find similarities between one of the research or the other research in psychology because yes, they are. They're derived from one theory or the other theory, but yes, let's give them a benefit of doubt and let's separate them because they've worked for many years. Don't take the credits. Don't mix the credits of these two researchers. But yes, why not? Again, it's all psychology. It's all the psychology component, right? So yes, why not? We can make some like we do have common traits between Piaget's theory, Freud's theory, Erickson's theory, isn't it? Related to development, if
Yes,
you have
that's true.
studied. So yes, we can give that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so Caroline has a question. Schemas allow us to recall previously learned information when similar or linking information is provided. Yes, why not? Yes. But I was just trying to explain what schemas are. So they are mental representation about the objects that we have seen, about the objects that we have in a previous experience. So yes, why not? The answer is yes. Uh, Next question is from Arlen. Emotional arousal improves memory, so maybe that's why women have met. Yes. I think I don't know. I can give you all a biased answer that men why they don't remember, so they're bad with memories. Maybe they don't want to remember. So they're like they have this thing that we don't want to remember, which is not necessary for us. So they have this. I don't know how many boys are here, men are here. So is that what follows with you all?
Miss, is
We
that
have
men
time
are
travel.
wired differently than women, like in terms of
Yes.
emotion? So emotion sends the message to the brain, so they think differently and they act differently.
Yes,
They're
why not?
supposed to.
We females think differently than why men cannot think differently. I think there are some DNA differences. Yes, yeah, definitely. Why not?
Oh yes,
Mm.
they are.
Vital values.
Miss Miss
Exactly.
Everett, in unit
No,
3 that
we have a
men
question.
actually
Dennis, just a second.
don't
So,
recall. Yes, I'm
Denisa,
playing them.
just a second, Denisa. So Wendell has suggested that, are we suggesting that men are, no, not, we are not saying that they are emotionless. It's just that our brain functions differently. Again,
Yeah,
we
you're
can,
right, miss. Women tends to emotion override their kind of intellect sometimes. I'm not biased, like it tend
I
to.
don't
And so
agree with that, Samson. Good
I
morning.
thought you say that women are emotional
but
beings.
emotion wise, they tend to, they're great women who think greatly, like Margaret Thatcher and people like those. But they are women who think emotionally sometimes instead of intellectually, and they to the problem at hand. If you have to solve a problem, I might
Samuel,
be
you do
biased.
recognize that the same can be said for men, because we have men who would remember the dates, since we're talking about
They
that.
are, they are.
And you
Remember,
have,
it's
you have
research.
those
Research
who would
shows that
reject it.
research is 95%
So
sure. Point nine
okay,
five.
class, just a second. So after reading for so many years the differences between memory and all those, reading all this research paper, I have come to a conclusion. It depends. It is totally an individual differences. So
I
it's
think
not
so.
about men and women, but it's the individual differences, the kind of environment every individual has been provided with, the kind of situation we live in, and the priorities, the motivation, the intention, all these are some important component factors. So being a psychologist, let's not be very specific about men and women and gender. Let's not get into gender biasness. It's you can talk about individual differences also. Before talking about gender differences, we also have to advocate the theory of individual differences. So when we study psychology, it's very important that we understand what is individual differences, the cultural context. Huh? Right. So this has to, it could be a long debate, and many people have written books also. Right. Men from this planet and women from that planet. So I don't know what to say in that. So according to my experience and my research, I would say it is all about individual differences, right? And yes, the society, Amanda has mentioned the society, the social responsibility. Yes, all this also are some important factors. Hmm. Right. Okay, I think Denisha, you have a question. Somebody was talking about Unit 3. Can we move to Unit 3?
I was saying that I've read in Unit 3 when they did these brain scans and MRI and so on, they had assessed men and women long-term memory. And the theorists, they proved that women actually have longer, or I should say more long-term memory than men. That is why they're able to recollect dates and time as against men, because women, um, they are more detail oriented to see. I mean, they didn't use those words, but this is how I understand it.
Yes, that is why I mentioned that yes, we are different, everybody is different, individual differences. That is why I talked about the concept of individual differences. You'll read this again in MPC 3 paper, personality and all those stuff. So personality also you're going to read. It's going to be very interesting for you all. Okay, let's come back to the neuropsychological basis of learning and memory. Here we are going to understand. So let me warn you, it's going to be more scientific. So don't get confused. I don't know if you are putting extra effort or not. If you have read, then you'll be able to understand it quickly. Otherwise, you might face little difficulty. But again, no problem. You can still go home and read. So there are some scientific evidence and there's some biological names which you have to understand in this topic. So Unit 3, it covers like neuropsychological basis of learning and memory. So this is the topic, and
Miss,
it
Miss, can I stop you a little? Good morning.
yes,
Hello.
yes.
I just have I have a question just before you move on.
Hmm.
Does eating a balanced diet help with us, like help with our memory, help our brain, or
Yes,
that
yes,
has nothing to do?
it does help. So we like exercise, meditation, your balanced diet, all this is going to prevent cognitive decline. Have you heard about cognitive decline, cognitive impairment, dementia, Alzheimer, all this, forgetting problems, memory disorders we're experiencing, every individual is experiencing these days, amnesia.
Thank you.
right? So all these are, yes, it is there. Okay, so in this topic we are going to talk about memory and brain. So what are the brain area responsible for different kind of memories, and then what happens when certain part of the brain suffers injuries. Then we will talk about amnesia, we'll talk about brain surgery, memory loss, amnesia and the medial temporal lobe. So like I mentioned, our brain is divided into four lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal lobe. So temporal lobe is responsible for language comprehension and language expression. And we also have Broca's area and the Wernicke area. Wernicke area is in the left temporal lobe. So we'll see how people got these names. Then memory consolidation and hippocampus. So like I mentioned, we don't have any evidence that in which part of the brain our memory is stored, but it is believed that if the part of hippocampus, if the brain area, the hippocampus, if it's affected or get injured, then we can have certain kind of amnesia. And then we'll also talk about the anterior and lateral temporal lobes and memory, like language comprehension, language expression. So if the left temporal lobe of the brain gets affected, then maybe we're not able to express our language or not understand language or comprehend language. So that one we are going to see. Then imaging the human brain and memory. So the different kind of memory: episodic memory, semantic, procedural, and implicit and perceptual priming. All this we are going to see in Unit 3. And yeah. So here is an history on like human memory, brain damage, and amnesia. So all these are some historical background how people have studied. So you can find that in the year 1940s and 1950s, surgeons would treat neurological and psychiatric diseases. So even if you are interested in abnormal psychology, you'll get to see the history that earlier when people would suffer any kind of psychological disease or psychiatric disease, their brain would be open up, so the surgery would be done, and the prefrontal lobe were removed, and
Miss,
corpus.
how Stephen Harkers was in a wheelchair and still his brain was functioning in that kind of capacity. Can you
Which
shed
person?
some light on Stephen Harkers? He died lately. The
No, he
great
was
neurologist.
Hawking. Stephen
Hawking.
Hawking.
Mr. Stephen
Okay.
Hawking.
No,
He was like just using his brain alone to do all what he has to do. Like he was in a wheelchair kind of.
yeah, he was in a wheelchair, so I haven't studied about him a lot, but yes, we can think about him. So yes, maybe I can read about him next time and come. He was
Yeah.
affected by some kind of injury, but yes, we'll see how he was a wonderful person as a scientist also. We'll see about him, but let's understand the background of how a brain, what is the relationship between brain surgery and memory loss. So in the year, as you can see in these studies also, like 1940, 1950s, in this time when people would suffer some kind of psychiatric disease, surgeons would operate their brain. So they would just open up their brain, and do the surgery, but the person won't survive for long. So this is how psychiatric disorders were treated earlier. And you'll see this all in the history of abnormal psychology. So all these researches were done by William from the Montreal Neurological Institute. So they also tried to study epileptic patients and schizophrenic patients, and then he had this under quotation. So he has this explanation: bilateral resection of the uncus and the amygdala alone, or in conjunction with the entire piriform amygdaloid hippocampal complex, has resulted in no marked physiological or behavioral changes, with one exception of a very grave recent memory loss. So severe as to prevent the patient from remembering the location of the rooms in which he lives, the name of his close associates, or even the way to the toilet. So after certain kind of, even all these brain areas, all these are brain areas that has been cut, the person is not able to recall, so we can again I would mention that no brain area, we are not able to identify which part of the brain is responsible to store the information. So that it's very complex. I have seen brain in real life also when we were doing our masters. So we have seen in India, like AIMS. If I don't know if it's a very famous hospital in India. So they have shown us the areas are very interrelated. So it's very difficult to perform brain surgeries, you know. So that is why I think people would not survive for a longer period of time when the surgery was done in 1940s and 1950s. So here is a medial view of human brain, as you can see. Just try to remember it. So here is the medulla, the pons, the hippocampus. So researchers have proven that if these areas are affected, then uh, uh, some parts of the memory gets affected. Then amygdala, emotions are related here, hypothalamus. And again, it's not that clear, but yes, you can have a view. Hmm. And yes, here is a case study of HM. So I would just read a case study about this person. So HM was a young man who suffered from a difficult to treat from of epilepsy that progressed in severity during his teen years. Over the years, his physician had treated him with the available drugs to minimize his seizures, but these drugs were largely ineffective from him. As his seizures worsened in his 20s, he decided to try then radical new therapy that involved surgery. At that time, neurologists knew that many seizures originated in the medial portions of the temporal lobe and from there spread to other areas of the brain, leading to violent seizures and often loss of consciousness. It was also becoming increasingly clear that surgically removing the brain region in which the seizure activity originated, the so-called seizures focus, could help patients with epilepsy. The decision in HM case was to remove his medial temporal lobe bilaterally in a procedure called temporal lobotomy. So it's a case study. It's a very famous case study. And have you read about this person? Abhi, like, did you read yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I'll just continue with the reading. So following recovery from this major neurosurgical, so the it was done temporal lobotomy. The surgery was done, and HM's epilepsy did improve. The surgery was success, both with regard to his surviving the risks associated with any surgery of the brain and with regard to the epilepsy. So it was successful in such a manner that he survived, and his epilepsy was also treated. So, however, physician, family, and friends began to realize that HM was experiencing new difficulties. So, for example, a year and a half after the surgery, which was performed in September 1953, HM displayed clear problems with his memory. Although it was April 1955 and HM was 29 years old, he reported his age to be 27. HM would say he did not remember even ever meeting certain individuals, even when he actually spoke to them a few minutes earlier, and then they merely left the room, returning after a short delay. HM was profoundly amnesic, that is, he suffered from disorders of memory. However, HM did not have the kind of amnesia one sees depicted in television shows or movies, where the character has a total loss of all prior memories. Indeed, HM knew who he was and could remember things about his life. This is up until a period prior to his surgery. However, it became increasingly clear that HM could not form new long term memories. So, because of the case, just the case, we can say that yes, our long term memories again, I mean, the temporal lobe was removed, but again, scientists have provided evidence that he couldn't remember information or send information to long term memory. So that's what he the through these case studies it has been, you know. So this is the reason why we don't have a particular a specific, you know, region that where our memories are stored. But again, like, we do have evidence that language comprehension and language expression is done, it is helped by the temporal lobe. But yes, let's continue with the case study. So formal neuropsychological tests were performed on HM to establish the nature of his cognitive deficits. This test shows that his intelligence was well above normal after the surgery. He also had no perceptual or language problems and seemed generally fine, with no changes in his personality or motivation. However, when memory tests were administered, HM scored well below normal. The bilateral removal of HM's medial temporal lobe produced a highly selective deficit in his memory ability, leaving other cognitive functions intact. HM had normal short-term memory, sensory and working memory were working well, was perfectly fine, but he developed a severe and permanent inability to acquire and store new information. The transfer of information from short-term to long-term memory was disrupted. So can you see the differences, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, how before the surgery, how the person to in this case what happened, to stop the seizure attack transferring to other parts of the brain, the temporalectotomy was done, but later on what happened, the person was, because research, I mean, if researchers were, I mean, if doctors or surgeons, if they were aware of the fact that he couldn't have a long-term memory later on, or if his long-term memory will be disrupted, then the surgery would not have been done, but there was no information. That is why this thing was developed. So we had lagged very much behind between on brain research. So that is why neuropsychology, psychology, cognitive psychology, or cognitive neuroscience, they're coming into the picture, and the people are studying. So now again, let's understand HM case more in detail. So amnesia. So what happened? Why amnesia happened, or in this case? So when the medial temporal lobe was removed, the HM. I mean, this person, he has developed amnesia. So we'll see. So which regions of the medial temporal lobe were critical for supporting the long-term memory ability loss in HM? The medial temporal lobe includes the amygdala, hippocampus, and arthonial cortex, and the surrounding parahippocampal and parahindial cortex areas. So we'll see that in a picture also we can see. So these are the 4 or 5 areas that are that are in the medial temporal lobe. So we can make a conclusion that yes, our long-term memory are in the medial temporal lobe. But again, this is one of the case, just a case, not. I mean, it cannot be universally accepted. It cannot be generalized. So in not in psychology, but to accept any theory, it should be, it should be in a generalized format. So again, we'll see this. So for the past 40 years, scientists studying HM used surgical reports of his lessons to guide theories of memory and amnesia and their neural basis. Reports by Scoville, who performed the surgery, indicated that all of HM's hippocampus in each hemisphere has been removed. HM's brain and surgical lessons were re-evaluated with improved accuracy with high-resolution neuroimaging methods such as MRI, and it was found that in addition to the hippocampus, some of the HM's surrounding cortex was also removed. So like I mentioned, I've seen a real brain. There's a very thin line between every part of the brain. So it's really difficult, and I mean, surgeries should not be done randomly. So we have to think and rethink about when any brain surgery has to be done. So is damage to the hippocampus sufficient to block the information of new long-term memories? Considered another patient. We also have another case of RB who lost his memory after an asthmic episode, that is reduction of blood to brain. So this is also what happens when we've suffered from Alzheimer or dementia. So as we age, our neurons, there is less cerebral blood flow. So when there is less cellular blood flow, our neurons, they shrink, and that is why we are not able to process information, or I mean, that is why we're not able to store information for a longer period of time. So this also happens even in Alzheimer and other cases in cognitive impairment also. That is what my research is going on for my PhD. Okay, so coming back to RB's case. So okay, this is the case, asthmic episode, reduction of blood to brain during bypass surgery. So RB developed dense integrate amnesia similar to HM's. He could not form new long-term memories. He also had a retrograde amnesia that extended back to 1 to 2 years, slightly less severe than HM's retrograde loss. After his death, RB's brain was donated for study, permitting a detailed analysis of the extent of his neuroanatomical damage. In RB's case, lesson was found to be restricted to his hippocampus within each hippocampus. RB has sustained a specific lesson restricted to the CI pyramidal cells. These findings in patient RB support the idea that hippocampus is crucial in forming new long-term memories. RB's case also support the distinction between areas that store long-term memories and the role of the hippocampus in forming new memories. Even though retrograde amnesia is associated with medial temporal lobe damage, it is temporally limited and does not affect long-term memories of events that happened more than a few years prior to the amnesia-inducing event. So here is another, I mean, in HM case, it was claimed that medial temporal lobe is responsible for storage of long-term memory, but that is not in the case of RB. it was the hippocampus. When the hippocampus was removed, in his case, the memory was stored, the long-term memory was stored in the hippocampus, and when the hippocampus was removed, still the person faced amnesia inducing event. So again, we are back to zero now. We don't have any evidence that where our memory is stored, in which part of the brain. So any questions? Is it heavy, class? For me, it's quite heavy.
I just have one question.
Yes, Dennis.
Since amnesia or dementia and Alzheimer's can be hereditary, is it possible that a child can inherit good memory from a parent?
Memory, I don't think so. They're hereditary. No, I haven't read any evidence that memory are hereditary. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Excuse me, miss.
Yes,
Just
Janet,
one
yes.
question here. Just as you were talking about all these different reasons for having memory loss and so on. Now, if a part of the brain begins to shrink, what happens there?
So over there, when as we age, our brain shrinks, right? So there is less blood flow. There's reduction of the blood flow in the brain. So our brain shrinks. Are not brain, our neurons. Our neurons, neural networks that shrinks in the brain, and then we don't. I mean, when there is no blood flow in the brain, then we're not able to recall it. So even our neurons also are responsible. So we have, like I mentioned, our neurons are I mean, how do I put it up? We do have a hardware. Yesterday I was mentioning that we do have a hardware, that is our brain, but there are certain, again, as like I mentioned, I've seen brain, so they are very small structures, very and even in the cases also, in the case of RB and HMU, it has mentioned, studies and researchers have mentioned that it is very difficult to take or to come with any surgery or to cut any areas, right? So again, I think it's very confusing statement, and again we are back to zero, that we don't have any evidence. And even your question is a very valid one, that if we shrink, if there is less blood flow, then why do we forget? So Alzheimer is a different thing, but yes, Alzheimer, you have. I'll explain that. I'm working on that research paper, so maybe once I'm done with that, I'll explain that. So it is basically the cerebral blood flow, which when there is a less blood flow in these cerebral areas of the brain, then our memory shrink. Otherwise, for these cases, HNM, RM, you can see. So people would claim that it was because of medial temporal lobe, or it was because of the hippocampus or the amygdala. But in RB case, it was completely the hippocampus, and in HM's case, it was completely the medial temporal lobe. So again, from the beginning, I've been saying that we don't have any evidence that which part of the brain is responsible. So yes, definitely there is a difference between Alzheimer, dementia, mild cognitive impairment. So there are some other factors also. So my research, it provides evidence to certain physiological condition also that could lead to MCI, that is mild cognitive impairment, and then MCI is divided into different branches like Alzheimer, Lewy dementia, vascular dementia, then amnestic mild cognitive impairment, non-amnestic mild cognitive impairment. So all these are some domains that we have studied due to that happens due to shrinkage of brain after we age, since we age. And all this happened because of stress, because of our lifestyle, because of our food. All this are responsible.
Miss, along with
Excuse
that,
me, miss.
in your studies, is it possible that persons from a certain profession are more prone to dementia? Because I've heard, I can't say that I've read because I didn't research it, that persons within the teaching profession, and I've seen many teachers in their old age develop dementia. Is there any relation between
So Danish, I haven't read any research paper as such, but yes, I can provide evidence to the environmental factors, the stress. Stress could contribute. So if you're a teacher and if you mention that yes, we forget, we could develop certain issues, then it's because of the stress. Yes, yes, it's the years of stress, environmental factors, the food, the lifestyle. Why not? So not a particular, maybe they have this generalization, but yes, it's the stress that damage the brain. Yes, why not?
Excuse me, miss.
Yes.
Miss, um,
Okay, class, just a second. Nessa has raised her hand. After that, I'll
mhm.
take Wendell, and then we can go to Grace. Nessa, you have raised your hand. Okay, Wendell, you can continue, please.
Yes, thank you. I think someone asked a question just now that I would just like to follow up on. If you can have negative um, uh, generational effects, so a person could have a generationally association with schizophrenia or generational bipolarity or even generational signs of amnesia. Can a person not have generationally associated positive things? Like by generation, they are likely to be more intelligent or have better IQ as a result of hereditary genes. Just like there might be the negativity where because of hereditary genes, a person might have these negative things, schizophrenia or bipolar or stuff like that.
Wendell, that's a very interesting question. So, we have evidence for like schizophrenia. So, all the psychological disorders, they are hereditary. Yes, we do have evidence, but we don't have evidence that intelligence is hereditary. We don't have any evidence to that. So, I haven't read till now. Right till now, I've been reading that intelligence is not hereditary. It is environmental based. I mean, it's an environmental. We can have um, so, for example, somebody who is a car puller or something like in India, rickshaw puller, if you know. So they're very poor and they're not studied, but the children, they're very smart, they're very intelligent. So I don't have any evidence to that. Maybe you can read and then we can discuss that in later.
Okay,
Right?
thank you, miss.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
miss. As you were
Okay.
speaking, a question that I need to find out because of an injury that occurred in one of the schools here in Linden. Does injury to a person head, their brain, stem from cause migraine or impairment in speech or so?
Oh, Grace, I didn't get your question. Can you repeat?
Okay. As I was listening to you, my question is, does injury to the brain, to the head, cause migraine, severe headaches, impairment of speech,
Yes, yes, why
and
not?
those
We
kind
do
of
have
things?
evidence. Yes, we do have evidence of brain injuries. So after a brain injury, what happens? So we have this Professor Paul Wernick or something that was Paul Broca, Wernick area. So if a damage that happens at the left temporal lobe, so that was studied by a researcher. His surname is Wernick. I couldn't recall his full name. So yes, he identified that if any damage happens to this area in the left temporal lobe, then we can have after an injury we could we could forget or maybe comprehension, not speech impairment, but it would be Cascal Wernick, right? So yes, we could suffer from expression of speech. Our expression of speech could get affected. Not speech impairment is a different thing. So this one we could suffer.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yes, Medial.
Yes, good morning, Miss. The economist John Nash a few years ago died, and
Yes.
he was schizophrenic. And
Yes.
there was a movie that was
Beautiful
made,
mind.
A Beautiful Mind. I would like to know if he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and how did he actually was able to beat schizophrenia, if it was just for the movie or if it actually happened, because he was able to think differently. And I would like to know how was that possible when the brain was already damaged?
No, brain was not damaged. In schizophrenia, your brain doesn't get damaged. You have, first of all, you have to read this. So you are going to, okay, just read this. Today, you just read about what schizophrenia. In schizophrenia, your brain doesn't get damaged. Okay, so it's a psychological illness. There is no brain injury, or no, there is no brain damage. There are certain neurotransmitters that are responsible. So when there is a neurotransmitter, serotonin, I guess. So if there is an high level of serotonin that is transmitted in your brain, then you the person can get affected with schizophrenia. So all the psychological illness, that is why you are studying. We will also study in clinical psychology the different kind of neurotransmitters that are responsible for different psychological illness, like depression. So if dopamine level is, if there is less transmission of dopamine by the neurotransmitter in your brain, then the person can get affected by depression. So schizophrenia, first of all, you have to understand the differences. All these are not brain injury. It's not related to brain injury, but even the role of neurotransmitters.
Okay, thank you, Miss.
Okay, yeah. Can a pregnant mother constantly taking illicit drugs cause her not specifically schizophrenic, Abigail, but yes, there could be some other issues that could take place. Why not? Brain damage could happen, definitely.
Why I'm asking this is because I have some relatives who's my adopted brother. His mother was a drug addict. Well, still is, right? And she was constantly taking drugs and stuff like that while he was in the womb. And he appeared fine at first and so forth, but when he got to his adulthood, he developed schizophrenia.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's why I asked that question.
Okay, so when you will study this in clinical psychology, maybe next year, so you'll get to know that all this psychological illness, there is no one possible reason. It could be drugs, again, neurotransmitters. And let's understand that schizophrenia or the psychological illness or the psychiatric illness, all these are dependent on the neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters, what happens, how it can be controlled. So psychiatric medicines are there. There are various psychiatric medicines, right, which could be controlled through certain drugs. Then why not? If this is the case, then like you're mentioning, it's a real life example. So when certain kind of drugs are taken, then yes, we could develop certain psychiatric illness, but again, that could be controlled using certain drugs, again, some medicines, because we do have medicines. Yes,
Okay, thank you very much.
that would happen. Why not? Yes, Amanda, it's not physiological problem, but it's psychological because neurotransmitters. Yes, the reason for schizophrenia is a physiological problem in the sense that physiological reasons are there, but it's not a physiological problem. It is a psychological problem. Again, you're right, it's not anatomical, but I would like to correct you. It is more of I think you meant physiological in the sense that it is the transmitters that are responsible for schizophrenia. So yes, in that you are partially correct, but you can use it psychological. But yes, physiological reasons are there, and those are known as neurotransmitters. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Yes, please. Yes, Ryan.
Just to add to what you're saying, schizophrenia deals with a distortion of the mind, and the neurotransmitters, once they are defected, you will have that problem with it. So just to associate with any anatomical changes, right? There's no disorder in terms of structure, right? So schizophrenia is a mental disorder, and there's no structural changes to say that, let's say, a trauma or particular disease, in a sense, is causing that. It's more of a disorder of the mind, the processes of the mind.
Yes, it is psychological, more of psychological, and the neurotransmitters that are responsible, like a hormones. So when we gain weight, when we gain a weight, which is like sometimes we are experiencing weight gain. So what is the reason? Is it the hormonal changes? One of the reason could be hormonal changes for weight gain. So the same applies for psychological disorders also, or the psychological illness, the neurotransmitters. Yes, right? Okay. So class, a lot of reading has to be done, otherwise we would confuse all the neurology, biology, psychology, anatomical, all this, yes. Hmm. So can we have more questions, or shall we move on to the other topics?
Can we move on?
Okay, okay. Again, they're very difficult and lengthy one. I don't want to start it right now. Are you all in the position to absorb it?
Miss, we have to do some work on my own. This is like science, natural science coming into play.
Yes, it is. It is, and it's really like for me also it's too lengthy and hard right now. Okay, so I'll just take one more topic and then we can wind up. So 3.3, that is memory constellation hippocampus. So this topic that is on page number 35, they're talking about evidence, the relationship between hippocampus and memory. So all these, all the biological processes, or the kind of information that we have from short term to long term, sensory to short term to long term, where all this gets stored. So researchers, they have this evidence that it gets stored in the hippocampus, and so you can read this once. And we just have one topic that we have to discuss in this unit, I mean in this area, that for memory consolidation hippocampus is the alcoholic Korsakoff syndrome and diencephalic amnesia. So the medial temporal lobe is not the only area of interest in human memory. Amnesia emerges from brain damage in other regions too. For example, damage to midline structures of diencephalon of the brain causes amnesia. So another again evidence to brain damage and brain and memory. The prime structures are the dorsomedial nucleus of the thalamus and the mammalian bodies. Damage to these midline subcortical regions can be caused by stroke, tumors, and metabolic problems like those brought by chronic alcoholism as well as trauma. Yes, recently an evidence has been found that alcohol does contribute to memory damage or brain damage, and that could lead to memory impairment, not impairment, sorry, memory loss. Impairment is a different thing and memory loss is a different thing. So you'll have to read this. Then in the last half of the 19th century, the Russian psychiatrist Sergei Kasok reported an antegrade and
Miss,
retrograde
please share
amnesia.
your screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought my screen has been... Okay, so I was talking about this topic, memory constellation and hippocampus. So here is an evidence, alcoholic. So they're providing evidence on how it's not just the temporal lobe that is responsible for memory loss, but damage by caused by strokes, tumors, or metabolic problems could also lead to amnesia. And this area is known as the subcortical. Where it is, I just missed it. Yeah, subcortical damage to the damage to this midline subcortical regions. So because of these problems, damage could happen to the midline subcortical regions. And in the last half of the 19th century, the Russian psychiatrist Sergei Kasok reported an antegrade and retrograde amnesia associated with alcoholism. So their evidence, even recent research was also found on alcoholism and memory loss. So long-term alcohol abuse can lead to vitamin deficiency that can cause brain damage. Patients suffering from alcohol Korsakoff syndrome have degeneration in the diencephalon, especially the dorsomedial nucleus of the thalamus and the mammalian bodies. It remains unclear where the dorsomedial thalamic nucleus, the mammalian bodies, or both are necessary for the patient's amnesia, and damage to the diencephalon can produce amnesia. So now we have various brain areas: medial temporal lobe, hippocampus. Then we have this subcortical, middle subcortical region of the brain. Then we have the thalamic nucleus and the mammalian bodies. So right now, after reading all these notes, we can come to the conclusion that because of it's not just one region of the brain, but there are various part of the brain various region of the brain that is responsible for memory or memory storage. Okay. So here is another topic: anterior and relatal temporal lobes and memory. Mm. Okay, so we also have evidence that cortical damage or the damage to the neocortex of the brain can also lead to brain injury, brain memory loss. So here all these are some names that has been mentioned. So we can read this. One region of the spatial interest is the temporal neocortex outside the medial temporal lobe. So lesson that damage the lateral cortex of the anterior temporal lobe near the anterior pole lead to a dense amnesia that includes severe retrograde amnesia. In such cases, the entorhinal cortex and perihippocampal cortex may be involved. The retrograde amnesia may be severe, extending that many decades before the amnesia-inducing event. Progressive neuropsychological disease like Alzheimer, herpes simplex, and involves viral infection of the brain are two such conditions. So class, yes, you can read this. All these are some, nothing much has to be explained, but these are some brain areas, like what happens in retrograde amnesia, which part of the brain. So it is the damage to the anterior temporal lobe. And then lateral and anterior regions of the temporal lead. I mean, if these areas are damaged, then that could lead to deficits in the long-term memory also. So neocortex and all these topics are, I mean, they are, providing evidence to brain damage. Right?
Excuse me, Miss.
Yes, yes, yes.
Miss, do we have any subjective case studies where professionals like you and other doctoral person would have documented their stages of memory loss or amnesia from a professional standpoint?
So from a professional standpoint, what you could do is maybe you can pursue some kind of internships in your hospitals nearby.
No, I'm asking if it was ever done. If you have research where psychologists and psychiatrists who are professionals have documented the mental deterioration or the mental changes with these different things, amnesia or schizophrenia, bipolarity. Is there any documented work where professionals who
Yes, we do have.
understand?
Yes, yes. You can read the book by Barlow, Abnormal Psychology, Barlow. He's a very famous person who has written a lot on the different kind of psychological illness. Yes.
Can you say his name? Can you say his name again, please, Miss?
Barlow, 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 Barlow. Yes.
Thank you, Miss.
Okay, so here I would like to stop because I would want you all to read all this. I don't know if you have read or not, but with your faces, I can say that everyone is feeling sleepy. So just make sure that you read and we can have more discussion next time. So we'll start with 3.5 animal models of memory, like what kind of research are done with regard to animals. And yeah, so please give a reading and then we'll continue with unit 3 and 4. And then we'll move on to the next topic, block 2. So block 2 is quite interesting, all the theories of intelligence. They are more theoretical, so it will be interesting for you all. Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
miss.
class. So you can have question. We can have some question, and then we can wind up. Yes, Charmin.
Good. Good. All right. Miss, were you able to find out the information as it relates to the exam and the assignments that we were asking earlier?
Yes. So what they've mentioned that we have, you can, the university will release a notification soon. So most probably your admission has happened in which year? In which year you?
Pardon?
You got admission in which year? Like this January 2022?
No, miss, it would have been I believe the previous year, but we had some issues in terms of transferring from one university to the other.
Yes. Our year of admission was January 2022, Miss.
Okay, so January 22. So most probably it would be in the month of December, I guess. Yes. Yes, yes. Because you have your classes till August, and yeah. But anyway, you have the option to write exams anytime you want within 4 year of time or 4 year span of time. And also, yes, the university has suggested that. Yesterday I talked to them, so they mentioned that you can write a mail to them. They will reply to your queries. Nessa, you have a question? Nessa? You
I can
unmute
hear you,
yourself.
Nisa.
Huh. Nessa, unmute. Oh, you are on unmute, but still we can't hear you. Yeah, just text in the chat box. Arlene, I didn't get a question. Yes, it can happen, transference and counter transference. This topic, from where it is coming? It is not related to the topic that we have discussed right now. It comes under psychodynamic. Don't worry, it will come under counseling psychology.
It's a question that was asked by Miss Tiwari. I was just responding to it in the chat.
Okay, okay, okay. Yes, we'll cover that later.